Welcome, Cap Fam, to our latest edition of the Alumni Spotlight on Forward Capital Crusaders. Today, we're taking a little bit farther of a look back into our archives than even we have information for. But we're going to fly a little blind, but we are going to fly boldly into this week's interview. And we welcome from the class of 1977, 2001 Hall of Fame inductee from Capital Volleyball, Leah Austin. And Leah, first and foremost, thanks so much for making the time for us and for what knowledge and memories you're about to share from your time at Capital. We know that the atmosphere of Capital athletics at that time, and especially for women's athletics, was so much different than it is today. And we hope that you can shed some light on those things during your time. But before we get into all of that, for those that may not know you as well, what can you tell us a little bit about yourself as far as, what you called home before coming to Capital and when you attended and what you studied?
Well, I am glad to be here, Ryan, so thank you for the invitation. I was in a suburb outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and at the time at which I was looking at going to college, I wanted to stay somewhat in the region, and so I began to investigate schools in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, mostly regionally, and discovered that there were a large number of small, usually church-related schools in Ohio. The things that I was most interested in as I was looking to go to school was to have women's sports and physical education and law. Now, that may sound like an odd combination, but I wasn't certain when I graduated what I might be doing. So I was keeping my options open. And as I looked at all those schools, my grandparents happened to be in Columbus. So I thought, Capital sounds good. And then I discovered that there was a scholarship called the Tressel Memorial Scholarship, which was about as close to an athletic scholarship as women could get in those days. And it was combined sports and academics, and I qualified, so Capital was it.
And what a combination. You got the law school, you've got the affiliation with the Lutheran Seminary, and then women's athletics. It seems like it was the perfect combo. And as far as athletics goes, it was a really interesting time in our country's history. I mean, Title IX, the bill that passed in a nutshell that prevented discrimination based on sex for educational programs at schools that receive federal funding, that had only passed just a couple of years before you hit campus. So can you paint the picture of what athletics for females looked like or how they operated in the time that you were going through high school and getting into that college selection process?
Absolutely. First, remember that the Title IX was passed in 72, but was really not applied to athletics until 75. And even after that, it was challenged, before it became an established policy. I came from a suburban school in Western Pennsylvania, and in central Ohio, where I was, an awful lot of CAP folks were from smaller rural schools. And as I came in, for example, my high school graduating class was larger than Capital's graduating class for me. So a very different kind of culture. But as I came in for sports and was very, grateful for what we had, the schools were really far behind, at least my experience in Western Pennsylvania. So one of the biggest changes that I saw was what happened in the high schools in Ohio once Title IX, was enforced. It was an incredible change. When I came to Capital, I began officiating with one of my teammates, and so got into the high schools, and I was just shocked by how far behind they were. But by the time I graduated, and then as I began recruiting as a coach after I graduated, there was a large change in both the quality of the players as well as the coaching. So I think Title IX made all the difference for women's athletics, girls' athletics, Also, when I began my time, the organization that handled women's athletics was called AIAW, the Association of Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. And that was our governing body. The NCAA was for the men and AIAW was for the women. We had a totally separate system. There was no separation between large and small college. So just to give you a small idea of what it was like, we competed against Ohio State. And as it happened, the year that I came in with a couple other outstanding female athletes. And so between the three of us and other quality folks that were already there and would come after us, we did very well and even competed well against Ohio State. Although in the official games we lost, I think one of my proudest memories was a triples tournament in volleyball where we actually won, and it was over one of the teams from Ohio State. So it was very different at that time. When I was there, they did begin to go small college, large college. And so that's when we did not compete against Ohio State. That was changed. We had a lot of, once I began to be coach and thinking, along the lines of the organization of women's athletics, I discovered that there was a kind of a philosophical discussion going on. Did the women want to remain separate from the NCAA? Did AIAW want to stay separate from the NCAA? And a lot of that discussion centered around the question of scholarships. There was some feeling among the women leaders that scholarships may have led to corruption. And so they wanted sort of the pure spirit of athletics. So they resisted, I think, for a while, but eventually, like, other kinds of justice issues, separate but equal doesn't work. And so the eventual solution was to dissolve the AIAW and to become one with the NC2A.
Now, I could probably go down this history lesson with you for hours on end just to get a vibe, but we'll have to save that for another time, Lee. But, before we get into maybe your time at Capitol, can you give us an idea of what sports you played beyond volleyball, if there were any, and what made you kind of come to the sense that volleyball was the one that you wanted to focus on?
Well, another history lesson, I think, Ryan, is that there wasn't a focus. If you had asked me what my favorite sport was, I would have told you the one that I'm playing. And one of my regrets for some of the girls, who are growing up and women, is there is now very much an emphasis on focus and on specializing, making a choice at a young age about what sport you want to continue to play in. So when I came in, and I mentioned, two other women athletes, Beth Klupfer-Rice and Lori Fields-Rubicic, when we came in, we played everything. So we came in and played volleyball in the fall. We went straight to basketball after that, and then we went to softball in the spring. I continued to play volleyball and basketball all 4 years and played softball for 3 of those years. So was pretty much playing everything. The teams did fairly well at that time. I don't remember records. You had asked me about that, but I will tell you that in our senior year, we qualified to go to the regional tournament in Illinois in volleyball, and Capitol hosted the regional tournament for basketball. So we did fairly well. We won some games even at the regional level, but no, we did not, win the tournament. And so we did not go on to the nationals. But yes, it was one of those environments where a lot of us really enjoyed playing in different sports.
To me, that sounds like the collegiate dream, going from one sport right into the next. And so I kind of envy you, even from my perspective on that. So we're talking with Lee Austin, class of 1977, and a Hall of Fame class of 2001, kind of getting a vibe of what sports were like, not just in 1977, but for women in 1977. So we're going down memory lane right now. And Lee, was there a struggle in getting what you and your teammates wanted or needed to play, at least by comparison to the men's teams at Capitol at that time?
Well, like many things, it's a matter of perspective. For those of us that did not experience organized sport when we were young, I mean, I was an oddball and I had to play with the boys if I wanted to play baseball or basketball. I had to play actually at the Y with a bunch of men if I wanted to play volleyball. So there wasn't the opportunity. As a result, coming to Capitol, where there was some organization, some support, was a dream. So we were fairly content at the time because our expectations were not where I think they are now. So we felt that there was adequate provision. Now, we had to provide a lot of our own equipment, not the uniforms. We did not pay for travel. But let me give you kind of an amusing story, which I dearly love. It was a memory of our going to the regional volleyball tournament that would have been what, 76. And because of the fact that it was not budgeted, we had to really work on a shoestring. And by the way, that's one thing that all women coaches learned, was how to pinch pennies, because we could get more, with the dollars that we were given than I'll bet any of our male colleagues could have done. But the way that we went to the regional tournament, our athletic director at the time, who was Lee Sadler, had, for some reason, Capitol had donated to our women's program an RV. And so we traveled in that RV. And then when we got to Illinois, we did stay in a hotel, but she had worked it out with the cafeteria to get all of the food that we would have eaten, in the course of, however many days we were gone. And then she cooked in the RV and on a grill outside the RV all of our meals. So this idea of a per diem, to travel was nonsense. But on the other hand, it forged a lot of memories and good memories from that time.
Man, RVs, eating well, playing all year long. This sounds like not what I was expecting, but a very good time indeed. So I can understand why these are great memories to relive.
Well, for example, let me give one other addition. Capitol had steak night, once a week when I was in school. And so she got the steaks, and I'll tell you what, they tasted a lot better off the grill than they ever did in the cafeteria.
It's that special extra love that was given to him. It has to be. So can you look back and kind of give us a landscape of women's athletics at Capitol at the time? I know that you said you had played 3 sports all year round. Were those the only 3 provided, or were there others that other females were engaging in that time?
Well, I know there was tennis, because the other woman who came from the Pittsburgh area on the same scholarship I did was a tennis player. I was trying to remember if there was an organized field hockey program. I think there was. I think there was some sort of organized women's swimming. If not at the time, then it came on quickly thereafter. I know that we dabbled in lacrosse briefly, but I don't think that really was ever a formal organization. I think it was just a club for a brief time.
Excellent. Now, when you said that it's a matter of perspective as far as seeing what you either do or do not have, In your time at Capital and playing in athletics, did you see that, especially with the introduction of Title IX and its implementation in 1975, that the gap started being bridged, or that more provisions were being awarded to female athletic teams?
I believe there were, but a lot of the final changes, I think, took place after I left, even after I left coaching, because once Capital became an NC2A school, then I think that the comparisons and perhaps the push for equity, happened a little bit more. Um, but I did see some changes. Obviously, we were given, for example, to go to the regional, we were given some provisions so we could stay in a motel. Um, but, there still was a lot of difference. Um, I would say we were fortunate in that the quality of our coaching was pretty good. I know when I was playing volleyball, we brought in good coaches, but the coaches tended to be part-time. I don't, I would bet that the compensation that was given to coaches was not as good for the women as for the men. And so it's a little bit different, I think, since we now have coaches who are actually on the faculty. So there are just a lot of those kinds of, we had good folks and very good folks, as a matter of fact. I don't want to downplay any of ours. It's just that until we were established with faculty, with people who could get in on the conversation at the university level, then it was very hard to try and change some of the structure. And since that's part of our conversation on a national level right now, what do you do when there is a structured injustice? And it does take a lot of work to begin to first be aware of what it is and then how to make the changes.
No doubt about it. Now, I know that as time goes by, even the games themselves evolve a little bit. As you look back as a volleyball player, the game that you played, and I'm sure you keep in touch with what is happening in the volleyball world now. If you compare those two games as they were played, what do you think are some of the biggest differences?
When I went into coaching, the primary credentialing organization was the USVBA, and they had 3 levels of coaches, and I went through those 3 coaching levels. And the way that we conducted training practices was greatly different from what had been, especially in the high schools. The changes that I have seen over the years is that in the high schools, the coaches were also beginning to improve. And perhaps some of that is because they were athletes in college and so knew more about sport. But I began to see the quality of high schools really improving as the coaching improved, and the kinds of things that I would do in my own experience as an athlete in training, and then what I did with my coaching, I began to see on the high school level. So I can't say that I saw great differences, except more consistency at the collegiate level. The high school level changed drastically. I would also say the game of volleyball for women and for men, the physicality has changed. When you have improved your skills about as far as you can, then the difference is the physical makeup of the athletes. So bigger, stronger, faster, more powerful, has been, I think, the biggest change in athletics for men and for women. And the specialization, the availability of camps in summer. I was involved in camp every summer when I was coaching. So the availability of camps, the improved quality at the high school level meant that there were better quality athletes coming into the college programs, and that made a big difference.
It seems like all those are very positive forward signs of progression. So that is a good thing. We're here with Lee Austin, class of 1977 and 2001 Hall of Fame inductee of Capital Volleyball. And so as you've taken us through a little bit of a history lesson on a grander scale, let's kind of dial it in on those teams that you played on, Lee. I mean, who were the teams to beat back then when you were playing?
Well, as I said, when there was only one state tournament, we played everybody. I mean, we played, as I said, Ohio State. We played Dayton. We played Wright State. And when we went large, small, Ohio State kind of dropped out of that, but we continued to play Dayton, Wright State. But they were not always the best teams, at least in the beginning. The team that I remember in volleyball in particular was Mount St. Joseph out of Cincinnati, and they were the powerhouse, and they defeated Ohio State and Dayton and all these other teams as well. But then later, again, as we were really going large college, small college, even before the NC2A went to Division III, we were playing the best teams, I'd say, were Mount St. Joseph, Worcester, and Ashland.
All right. Now, I have to ask, was the rivalry between Capital and Otterbein alive and well back then as well, or did they not have a team? How was that rivalry being fostered in your time?
Well, it was, but I am proud to say that Capital was definitely a stronger team than Otterbein was, and so we won most of the time. I won't say we were undefeated the entire 4 years in all the sports, but Capital, when you're in volleyball and basketball, if you have three strong athletes in one class, then that's going to make a big difference. And as I said, there were other strong athletes that had just happened to come to Capital at the same time I did, and so we were very successful.
Well, that makes my heart happy, and I'm sure many other Capital fans' hearts happy as well. So what about you? I mean, you are a Hall of Famer after all, and unfortunately our records just don't go back to the time that you played. So can you provide some insights on either your style or just, certain things that that you did well that maybe got the attention of some of those voters?
Okay. I think that my perspective, and this is just how I approach athletics anyways, I was kind of the coach on the floor. I in volleyball was a setter primarily, and I was in basketball a point guard. So I was one who always wanted to understand and know the game, and tried to make sure that I worked with the coaches, to make sure that we were doing what we needed to do. So my mindset, I think, was always in some ways sort of cerebral. But on the other hand, for myself personally, I believe strongly in discipline, and so trained very hard. I knew that if I was a step slower or maybe not quite as skilled, I could make up for it by being in top physical condition. So I always emphasized training and discipline. And I would say also I was in team sports, and for me that was very important. The teamwork and the working together was something I valued, and is also something that I have always valued about sport, period. So, and I found that, and even as I was coaching, that not only the conditioning, but intensity and desire can help you go a long way as well. So those were values that I had. I found that with conditioning and with effort and desire, you had the great equalizer sometimes with folks that might have been slightly more talented or gifted.
Now, you kind of made your way and made your name as a volleyball player. So first I'll ask, what was your favorite aspect of playing volleyball? Was it something about the game, that, made you kind of draw toward that a little bit closer?
That's a difficult question. I guess I wasn't aware or realizing that so much of my nomination had to do with volleyball. But I would say that, yeah, it's kind of hard to say why, that drew me more than others. I do know that I saw the differences between the different sports. I often compared volleyball to football. Volleyball is a power game, and you play it in shorter segments. You may call a play, and you may execute it, and then you're either successful or you're not, and you go back, and serve or receive serve. So it felt to me more like football. And oddly enough, or maybe not oddly enough, I also took a coaching course in football from that time's head football coach. So football is something that was intriguing to me as well. So I would say it's the power, it's the short term. I also discovered that I am actually a better volleyball coach than I was basketball coach, because in volleyball, you have to be a very good training coach. You've got to be very good at what happens in practices, and you have to help those athletes to be able to play the game, because you have less influence on what happens when the game starts. So as a coach, if you want to win, you've got to prepare your team to be able to go on the floor and play. And that's a better style for me. I'd rather be the teacher and then let them go out and play the game.
And we'll get to your coaching career here in just a second, but you mentioned that, you were a 3-sport athlete, which is unheard of in today's world, but you also played basketball and softball. So can you give us kind of a really brief rundown as far as, what you played in those particular sports and maybe what your strengths were there?
Well, as I said, I was a point guard in basketball, and was big enough that I could be fairly good in all aspects. I was actually a ferocious rebounder, because I would box out the biggest person, and make sure I got the ball. But I would say my strengths were, I was a decent offensive player. I probably was in double figures my entire career, but I don't remember. I was not the highest scorer on the team. We did not really have the assist or those kinds of records. I was, like I said, probably pretty good in rebounding, but would not have had as much and assists as well. I played with a very good center, and so working with her and getting her the ball so she could score was my primary focus. In softball, I was a shortstop, was a good hitter for average, some power, but not a lot. I'm not huge. And so I was mostly had a very good batting average, probably close to leading the team most years. Strong arm, and so was pretty good at shortstop.
So you just like to be around the action all the time. That's kind of what it sounds like.
I did. I have to admit, I wanted to play.
Excellent. We're talking with Leah Austin, class of 1977, 2001 Hall of Fame inductee, triple sport athlete, as we are learning today. We want to kind of put a bow on it all. And as far as your time at Capitol, it wasn't done when you were done playing. You went on to coach. So tell us about that decision and what you coached and for how long.
When I graduated in 77, there, as I said, one of the difficulties with women's athletics was we only had one person who was on faculty who did coaching, and that was Lee Sadler. Beyond that, there was always a high turnover. So I remember being approached by Lee Sadler, I think, to coach the softball team first, because that's where I think probably the 4 years that I was there, we may have had 4 different coaches. So in the spring of 78, I began coaching softball and coached in 78, 79, and 80. At the same time, I was going to Ohio State to get my master's degree. So that seemed to work well. In the fall of 78, I think that's right, then I was approached about coaching volleyball. And first as an assistant to the person who had been the head coach when I played. And then after that, he just stayed as head coach for 1 more year. And then I coached as the head coach after that. So that was the time that I was there. You'd asked about success. I can't give you all the details, but I will tell you that in the state tournament in 1980, my last year, we did come in second. We were kind of hoping to win, but we came in second. And as far as volleyball was concerned, we definitely, had a winning record, and were competitive at tournaments. I just can't tell you. I don't have any outstanding memories of that in terms of signature wins or anything like that. But yes, we had winning records and some really quality athletes.
Well, we're going to have to start updating those archives on our end so that we can go relive all these moments as far as the statistics and standings are concerned. But as far as memories that we can reflect back on, Capital, I'm sure, is very special to you as it is to most that we talk to on this program. What about Capital, or what about your time there resonates with you the most as you look back?
The caring of the faculty and staff, the people that I worked with in physical education, for example, at that time it was Irene Sanders DeVolt, and Lee Sadler. Both were very helpful and professionally, and not just because I was an athlete. It was Dr. DeVolt's influence that got me into sports science at the graduate level. And it was Lee Sadler's influence in terms of my interest in coaching and administration. But beyond that, there were other professors that helped me out. And I guess at Capital, you were a person. You weren't a number. You weren't just a face in the crowd. Since I went to graduate school at Ohio State, I can tell you, I know what it is just to be a face in the crowd, and they have no clue who you are. But at Capital, they know who you are, and they care about who you are. And I think there was also a caring that was comprehensive. So it was caring about you as a person, caring about you as an athlete, and caring about you as a student. So it was that nurturing environment that I was so grateful for.
It seems to be a theme that we come across a lot here on the program as we talk to alums. And so, no doubt have had a full life of accomplishments and milestones. And, I know that we could probably talk long about a lot of those, but can you name a few of those things that you've accomplished over your life that you can share with us?
Well, I mentioned that I went into coaching. I went to Gannon University and coached there for 6 years, all 6 years in volleyball. We began to see the specialization taking place. So with the recruiting that I was doing, even though I went originally and did coach volleyball, basketball, and softball, I very quickly gave up the softball and coached volleyball and basketball. And then we built a recreation center. And so I felt I was being, called to make a change. So I shifted and directed the recreation center and coached only volleyball. So that was, a very satisfying, time for me and my career there. But it was in my time that I was at Gannon that I felt the call to ministry. So I began seminary after 6 years. So that was the fall of 1986. I would also say an interesting piece to this is that my approach to ministry is in many ways like what my approach to coaching was. First of all, the value of the individual people and their holistic development, that people would grow in all ways, spiritually as well as physically and emotionally, mentally, relationally. So always trying, to foster the development of the person, which goes directly into ministry. But also I look at my way of coaching and my way of being a minister as being very similar. My goal is to help people grow and to become more of the people that God has created them to be, so that they can go out and play the game of life. I even, in both my coaching time and then carried it over, took Paul's letter to the Romans, chapter 12, and paraphrased it, the team. Chapter 12 talks about the body of Christ having many members, and all are important. There is no superior or inferior member. And I took that and paraphrased it to fit what I call the team. And so the coach is no more important than the person who takes the statistics. And if you're the high scorer, that doesn't mean you are more important than the person who sits on the bench. So that approach to sport, to life in the church, as being something that we are supposed to be doing together.
A fantastic parallel for sure. I'm kind of thinking that I would have really enjoyed having you as a coach, Lee.
Well, thank you. I would have pushed you very hard, though.
You know what? You might have washed me out then. I'm not sure. So what are you doing now? I'm certain that you're still involved in some way, shape, or form in ministry. So what are you doing, and where are you doing that at?
Well, I'm in Apollo, Pennsylvania, at the Apollo United Presbyterian Church. This summer will be my 30th year of ordination. I am turning 65, but my intent is not so much to retire from ministry as I think it is time. I was a coach and worked with young people. I worked with folks, who were beginning to try and understand what life was all about. And it grieves my heart that that's an age that is absent from the church. And so what I really would like to do is find a way to reach out to young people and young adults, and find a way to just get a conversation going about faith and about Jesus Christ, so that I just want to be out among people. Coffee shop ministry, or I've even threatened that I would go into a bar and wear my collar and see if I could get a conversation going. But I just would like to be able to help some of what's changing, I think, in the life of the church.
Well, if you're looking for a brand for that, you can call it Cocktail in the Covenant.
Okay.
I don't know if that'll fit, but however it has to happen, it needs to happen. I like it.
Yes.
So last question here, Lee. Of all of the things that you've done and experienced, I'm sure it's hard to focus on just one, but can you give us and all young and prospective Crusaders a piece of advice that has helped you throughout your life?
Well, I think my first comment would be, know that you are a beloved child of God and seek your bliss. What have you been created to do? What are you passionate about? And pursue it.